Let's get a word from another proud Englishman. Kevin Schofield is the political editor at Huff Post UK. Oh, there's low blows and there's low blows, Kevin, isn't there?
I've never been so insulted.
Absolutely right. But it is interesting. I mean, just on that point, that like St Andrew's Day or patriotism does have a different... I mean, I think the Irish do it, you know, if we're talking about places in our vicinity.
Yeah.
The Irish do it brilliantly. You can go to a pub in Edinburgh or a pub in London and see St Patrick's Day celebrated.
Yep.
You wouldn't really... You don't get St George's Day celebrated here. You definitely wouldn't get it in Edinburgh, or certainly not Glasgow. But you can have a St Andrew's Day celebration. But it's, again, not as big as St Patrick's, but there is a sense that the Brits have, despite lots of those other countries thinking that the Brits have a sort of superiority complex. In fact, it's almost the very opposite, because we don't go out and celebrate, even though we have, you know, as the last texter said, you know, some reasonable sense of belonging and culture and history.
Absolutely. There's nothing at all wrong with any of that, and being proud of where you're from and having, you know, being patriotic. But you're right, I think at times we can be a little bit embarrassed about, you know, you're almost like apologising for having a flag, for instance. We are just, I think you're right, the Irish do it better than we do, but there's almost like a sort of uncomfortableness about having, you know, a flag on display. We're just not that type of country. Like America, you know, you see it, they have the flag poles outside their house and the flags everywhere, and it's just no one bats an eyelid, whereas here it's like, well, that's a bit strange because not many people do it. And I don't know why that is. I'm stumped as to think why not, because it's not as if you should be embarrassed. I mean, what the gentleman that called you Graham said there, all those things, I mean, even as a Scotsman, I can relate to, you know, a pint with your dad, banter with your mates, you know, a fry-up, supporting your team at the weekend, going to your work, playing with the kids. I mean, they're pretty universal things that we all do. It's not a peculiarly English thing, and there's nothing there to be
It's weird, isn't it? My mate lives around the corner from me, Millwall Rich, it should be known, and he is not only, he said like, it took a lot of boxes here, that a lot of people, he's got a shaven head, he supports Millwall, and he does put a flag up, and so last election he was putting his St George's flag up on the, he was having some work done on the house on the scaffolding, and as he looked down, Laura Trott was standing there with some leaflets in her hand.
What are the odds?
And he said, she looked at me like someone who clearly thought she'd come to the wrong house. And he said, he just looked down and went, all right, Laura, how's it going? And she suddenly thought, oh, he's a nice guy. And, you know, sat there, had a bit of a chat. And he's not what his perception gives off. He flies the flag. Well, he sent me a text this morning, happy St George's Day. Does it all the time. He's very, very proud of it. And he doesn't care what the critics might think about it.
No, absolutely, and there's no reason why he shouldn't. Do you remember when Emily Thornberry got herself into an awful lot of hot water?
Rochester.
It was Rochester by-election.
That's right.
And she posted this picture on Twitter of a house with St George's flag outside, and it was obvious, she denied it, but it was pretty obvious what she was getting at. It was like, oh, this looks a little bit...
She just wrote Rochester, didn't she?
Yeah, it was something like an image from Rochester or something like that. It's like, well, why? And it caused a huge furore.
What made it do that, by the way?
It was weird.
It was
never properly explained.
No.
But I think you could surmise what she was getting at, and it was just, it played into this stereotype that a lot of politicians, and interesting to see Laura Trott, who's, you know, a Tory, so it's not necessarily just a Labour thing, but a lot, certainly on the left, I think, are a little bit uncomfortable when they start to talk about nationalism, patriotism, and that's why you've got Keir Starmer almost going out of his way today.
Is he electioneering?
Oh, definitely. You know, this is coming just a week before the local elections. Reform are going to do very well. Labour aren't. They're probably thinking, well, a lot of Reform voters and former Labour voters, traditional white working class, will, you know, feel a lot of pride in St George's Day, and we don't want them to think that Labour's not the party for them, so they've got to kind of overcompensate almost for it.
The other big dominating factor, of course, today, and it was the dominating point at PMQs, Kemi Badenoch demanding an apology from Keir Starmer to women after he finally admitted that trans women aren't women. So this was a reasonable day for Badenoch.
Very good day, I thought. She was clearly very comfortable in what she was talking about, and this is something that, you know, it's not as if she's jumped on a passing bandwagon. You know, she's been very consistent on her views on trans issues, right? Going back to when she was in government, obviously. So she was in pretty strong territory, whereas, as you just said, Keir Starmer has blown with the wind a little bit on this one, and he was already shifting. He had shifted his position from 5 years ago when he would say a trans woman is a woman, and he fell out with Rosie Duffield, the Labour MP, who said that a woman needs to have a cervix and all this type of stuff. And then he shifted a little bit, but obviously the Supreme Court ruling has now allowed him to come out and say, well, this has provided clarity. A woman is an adult human female, which he would never have said that 3 or 4 years ago. But does
that, see, to me, I don't think he gets any house points for that, because what he's saying is he needed a Supreme Court ruling.
Absolutely.
To tell him that.
It got him off the hook.
It got him off the hook. He's really only deferring to the legal definition now, rather than what he personally thinks. So a lot of people now still look at him and go, he doesn't really think that. He's just deferring to this court thing.
No, absolutely. And it's now given them cover to be able to say what they're saying now. But again, for a guy who has got a reputation for U-turning and saying one thing when he's trying to get your vote and then saying something completely different or doing something different afterwards, it's not a great look again. And I think she really did punch that bruise. All 6 questions, all on the trans issue. And he had obviously prepared lines to come back with. 1 or 2 landed reasonably well, but it was definitely Kevin Badenoch's day today.
He hasn't apologised to Rosie Duffield. She still sits as an independent. She's the Canterbury MP, nicked the seat from the Tory. Julian Brazier, do you remember him?
Wow.
Who was I was oddly thinking about him this morning for some reason. I think possibly I was listening to Rosie Duffield being interviewed, and I remember when she, obviously being from that neck of the woods, it was my patch, so she hoovered up the seat from the Tories, who'd had it forever. And now she's an independent because of this. Now, would this not be a great chance for Starmer to go, look, Rosie, you went through terrible things, and boy, when you really read some of the stuff she went through.
Oh, it's terrible.
And some of those that sit very much in prominent positions on the front benches, who were back then, before they were in government, arguing, get rid of this woman, Rosie. Get rid of her. She's poison, she's toxic, she's a transphobe, probably an old white racist and a white supremacist as well. She had all sorts of terrible things said about her. Can Starmer not do that now? Is it too late in the day for him to apologise?
All things being equal, it would be a nice gesture if he did, but I think too much water has run under the bridge since then. Even since she quit, I mean, when she resigned as a Labour MP, it wasn't just on trans. Her letter was, all sorts of things. There's obviously an awful lot of bad blood between them, and I don't really think that she'd be interested in an apology from him now. In fact, there was a moment watching it on the TV. The parliamentary people, the director, obviously in charge of the images, cut to her at that moment,
which is not normally allowed.
No, it's not normally allowed to get a reaction shot, and the look, I mean, if looks could kill, the look on her face as she's looking at Keir Starmer as he's speaking was a picture. So I think even if he was to knock on her door
I
and
clocked
say...
that, and I wondered if that would be picked up.
Let's just let bygones be bygones. I just don't see that.
And she's done what? This will be her 3rd term when she came in?
Yeah, that's right. I think there was that many elections.
I know, we've had quite a few, haven't we?
Maybe 2017 she was elected, maybe in 2019 re-elected, in 2020.
Possibly, or was she in before then?
25. I can't remember now.
How long has Rosie Duffield been in? Adam will tell us in half a second, because he's got a diligent brain like that.
Yeah.
But either way, she might just go, I'll serve this out as an independent and then I won't stand again. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, though, for independents. It's really tough without that party machinery behind you. And just the numbers of people who go out and knock on doors for you and put leaflets through doors, it's very difficult, but not impossible. If you're a popular local candidate, a local MP, then it absolutely can be done. It just makes it much more difficult if you don't have that party apparatus.
Nearly 8 years Rosie Duffield's been an MP, so that would have been 2017.
Yeah. So, she's been around for a while.
Ministry of Justice says probation officers must consider the trauma of ethnic minority criminals before they are sentenced. Now, this is really interesting. This is not to do with the previous guidelines of, consider the ethnicity or the gender of somebody when sentencing. This is essentially about, I don't know, I mean, Robert Jenrick has vowed to get behind this. I'm not absolutely sure how you could reasonably do this.
No.
I mean, what sort of, when he says the trauma of ethnic minorities, is he saying that if a young black kid is in the dock, then the judge has got to consider the slave trade or something? Is that...
It's very odd. I mean, there's clearly a an issue, I think, with a disproportionate number of people from ethnic minorities being jailed, and that is something I think that politicians should be looking at to see what underlying reasons there may be for that. But the problem you have when you start bringing in these other sort of guidelines, shoehorning it in, it causes a backlash, and it causes a political row. So something that was maybe well-intentioned to begin with, if attempts to try and redress the balance are applied clumsily, then it can backfire and be counterproductive, and that's why then you end up with a Labour government trying to almost overcompensate by saying no, there's no such thing as two-tier justice, and it's a very difficult issue, but it's a strange one.
The other thing that Jeremy has been talking about is this uniting the Conservatives and Reform UK. I mean, that can take many different forms, whether it's actually a party that gets together, whether it's about an agreement to not stand in certain obvious seats where one or the other is going to win. I mean, Jeremy obviously still wants to be leader of the Conservative Party. I would suggest he's got perhaps every chance of realising that.
And he's not making any secret of that.
I don't know whether he is I don't know whether he has that personality to. I mean, the language he speaks is very popular with a lot of Reform voters.
Yes.
But I don't know whether you've got to go much further than that. Politics is about more than that, isn't it? You've got to be that character. You've got to have that certain X factor that's going to ignite the room in households that don't necessarily vote ordinarily Conservative. They've got to go, wow, this guy's good. And I think a lot of people would look at Jenrick and go, this guy's quite dull. Yes, and
I think British voters have got quite a good detector for someone who's maybe trying just a little bit too hard, because he has gone from being a sort of moderate in the party to being firmly on the right. He's obviously lost a lot of weight. He's sharpened up his image, his haircut. The stuff he puts on social media is high production values. He's obviously, whoever it is spending an awful lot of money making him look as good as possible. So he's clearly ultra ambitious. When you look at the quotes that he said, though, I mean, a lot of it is quite common sense. He's basically saying, look, if you've got Reform and Tories at each other's throat, dividing the right vote in politics, then Starmer will come through the middle. That's obvious. So what he's saying is we should try and unite. Now, he mentions coalition, which is an unfortunate word. I don't think he probably means a formal coalition between Reform and the Tories, but I think he wants to kill Reform. I think is what he wants to do. Reform want to kill the Tories. There's going to have to be some sort of accommodation made at some point, or one of them's going to have to kill the other. Something's going to have to happen.
Yeah, he said he's working to ensure Reform UK does not become a permanent fixture in British politics. Now, if you're Nigel Farage or Richard Tyson, you're listening to this, they'll go, yep, we know Bob's got to say this. That's exactly what you have to say at this stage, because and Reform would say the same thing. We're not here for any pacts. I mean, I would say it's pretty much a dead cert. There's going to be something. There's got to be.
There has to be,
because they could win I mean, there's all these polls say Reform will win on their own. I mean, that's a high-risk strategy.
Oh, yeah.
You'd be much safer if you were in bed together.
Well, even that poll at the weekend, which had Reform as the largest party, I think they had like 180 seats they would get. The Tories would have 165, the same as Labour. But you had them together. I mean, the Tory seats and the Reform seats, you've got 350 seats. So clearly it would be better from a right of centre point of view if there was one party there that was united. But as I say, there's so much bad blood again between Farage and a lot of Tories, and also they've got to be careful as well. There's that sort of Lib Dem vote there. A lot of them are quite maybe soft Tories, maybe, who would vote for a moderate Tory party. Are they going to want to vote for a Farage-led party of whatever description, or a Jenrick-led party which is firmly on the right? I don't know. So it's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one.